Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Marone for Westchester Talk Radio, and once again, we are with our friends at Hightower Westchester. We are fortunate at this moment to have Richard Flahive with us today. He is the Chief Investment Officer at Hightower Westchester, and we're going to discuss the ever-fun topic, managing money as a couple. Richard, where do we start?
Yeah, well, great to see you, Bob. Thanks.
Always.
For the time and having me on here. Yeah, it's a good topic. I think it applicable for couples all, shapes and sizes, age range, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the funny part of, I wrote a blog on this a number of years ago, and it's like, obviously couples are different in many different ways. They have their habits, their quirks, that we've all kind of come to love, about one another. But I think managing money, having those quirks and differences, it's important to understand that, but it also, it's important to kind of come together and be on the same page when it comes to your finances. There's just, countless studies, and I think we've all experienced this, at some point in our lives is, money can be a really big, major cause of stress, arguments, you see divorces, et cetera. So I think this is something that, people just say, hey, we're going to get married and everything will kind of come together and work out. I mean, having a plan in place, and figuring out what works for you is really important because everybody's different, right? Everyone has different priorities, attitudes about money. They grow up around money differently, depending on, their circumstances. I think it's just important not to delay this conversation and really just figure out how important money is and how different you are and the potential challenges that are, bound to happen here.
Okay, talk to us about a few different ways that couples can manage money. And remember, people are watching and listening.
Sure. I think, you can manage money in a couple different ways. And I think, right, you can have separate accounts, you can have joint accounts, you can have a combination of the two. I think, when you think about separate accounts, right, everyone kind of, just if you're getting married, right, you generally will have separate accounts. Everyone can kind of manage their own money the way they like. But as we all know, that coming together aspect, a joint account makes things easier, right? Whether it's just budgeting, seeing, all the expenses going in and out. I think that level of transparency can kind of lend itself to avoiding, making sure you have enough in your account to clear checks or whatever it may be, right? And also just to understand how you spend, right? I think, eventually you're going to figure out how one another and what their expenditures are and how they pay their bills, auto debits, et cetera. I think that having that joint account makes that a little bit easier and pretty, I think, self-explanatory there. The one thing on the joint account I've noticed over the years is, particularly now with the holidays coming up, is it's really difficult to hide gifts if you have a joint account. So something to keep in the back of your head there. But I think the question is okay. So now you have this joint account. How are you going to do your expenditures? How are you going to handle your rent, your mortgage, your utilities, your household expenses? I think having it all kind of lined up obviously creates less conflict. But I think the important thing about kind of managing this whole thing is having the conversations, right? So maybe it's, hey, listen, it's okay if you're buying day-to-day things, but hey, maybe let's sit down when it comes to larger purchases, or, you come into debt, right? I had student loans coming out of school. My wife did not, right? She owned a car. I did not. I was working in the city. So all these different things, right? She had a car payment. I didn't have a car payment. So prioritizing, understanding the assets, the liabilities, that stuff is things you want to work through and not just wake up one day and say, oh, okay, here it all is. What do we do? It's kind of nice to get that, kind of nipped in the bud.
I imagine some of these conversations can be very, very difficult, Richard. Any advice on how to approach them?
Yeah, preparation, like I said, being honest and transparent about things, and maybe just sitting down every now and then and going through your finances. As you've known me quite a while now, Bob. Relatively detail-oriented guy. I have my checklist. I have my budget spreadsheets and things like that. We have a client portal here that has all that. You can kind of track where your money's going. You could set limits on things. But I think just sitting down, discussing, whether it's wouldn't say monthly, but maybe a couple times a year, right? At the end of the year, you get together, sit down, and maybe that's a difficult conversation. Maybe a third party needs to be involved. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's a parent, an advisor, someone who's impartial and can provide that, unbiased advice to put you guys on the same page and say, hey, listen, here are the priorities. Here's what makes the most sense. I think the most important thing to get away from the difficulties is just transparency, just having honest conversations about it.
How about everyone's favorite topic, paying bills? What advice do you have for that?
I know I briefly touched on it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's different. My wife and I kind of attack it in different areas, right? Like she doesn't want to handle the cable bill. Nobody does. No one wants to talk to the cable company when the bill's wrong because you're going to be on hold for 4 hours and get hung up on. So I handle things like that. She loves handling stuff with the baby and the dog, and we kind of divvy it up and get it done that way. But I think whatever option you choose, it's deciding who's going to take it on and who and how, and have it set up right. The other question is just like how you pay them, right? Is it proportional? Do you split them equally? Everybody's different, right? I think you assume, oh, hey, everything's going to be equal, but some people come into relationships with massive amounts of debt. Maybe, these conversations can be difficult. I think just having the conversation up front and just being responsible for it and making sure people are in charge of it, right? And you're not missing it.
To wrap up, any last words of advice? This is really a useful but touchy subject, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm necessarily really saying anything that's, the silver bullet, so to speak. But I think at the end of the day, it's good to have these conversations. And I think we don't have them as much as I think people assume they're going to.
That's correct.
Whether it's to do with just income, raises, 401ks, expenditures, et cetera, just discussing finances in general, it is a touchy subject. It's an emotional subject. But it's something that has to be done. Very, very important, whether it's you're coming together for a marriage or whether it's just amongst family members, kin, next to kin, whatever it may be. It can be, there's also couples too that say, listen, I don't want anything to do with this, right? Whether it's the husband, the wife. I think allowing one partner to make all the money decisions or know where everything is and paying all the bills it's just a bad idea. God forbid something happens to one of the parties and the other has no idea where things sit, who to contact. You want your partner to be confident in handling the finances should something happen to you. And that just comes with having a plan, assessing it, reviewing it, whether, I hate to, try to sound salesy here and toot our horn, but it's like, hey, listen, if we can help in any way, be that arbiter, at least set up the conversation, whether it's intergenerational, whether it's within a household. I think we can do a pretty good job of that. We have some white papers on it. But I think the most important thing is there's no single answer here. There's no best way of doing it. Whatever fits your needs, your style. And will you get it right the first time? I mean, listen, my wife and I have been married, 6-7 years now. And I think, we're still figuring things out, right? Mm-hmm. It still takes some time. I think we have our heads around it, but there's going to be some trial and error, but don't let that stop you. I mean, just the goal is to get on the same page. And I think that's, very helpful to having a lasting and long relationship.
Richard, apropos of conversations that I've had with your colleagues about the white paper, about estate planning, about sitting down with family, and in this instance, sitting down with your spouse and discussing finances, these are things that people don't talk about. They're thought about, but never discussed. This particular broadcast, this podcast, is going to have great value because people will think and say, gee, this is a conversation we should have. Another job well done by you, Richard Flahive. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Bob. Thank you.
The pleasure's mine.
HighTower Westchester is a group of investment professionals registered with HighTower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with HighTower Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through HighTower Securities, LLC. Advisory services are offered through HighTower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is not indicative of current or future performance and is not a guarantee. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data and information referenced herein herein are from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other information contained in this research is provided as a general market commentary. It does not constitute investment advice. Hightower Westchester and Hightower shall not in any way be liable for claims and make no expressed or implied representations or warranties as to the accuracy or completeness of the data and other information, or for statements or errors contained in or omissions from the obtained data and information referenced herein. The data and information are provided as of the date referenced. Such data and information are subject to change without notice. This podcast was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of Hightower Westchester and do not represent those of HighTower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates. HighTower Advisors do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented to any entity as tax advice or tax information. Tax laws vary based on the client's individual circumstances and can change at any time without notice. Clients are urged to consult their tax or legal advisor before establishing a retirement plan.